Hello, my name's Hartman Deetz. I'm from the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, and sitting here with Andre.
Yep. Kanipium, Etasawas, Minikisu, Masmata. Welcome, my name's Andre Strongbearheart from the Nipmuc Nation. Happy and honored to be able to sit with folks who have so much knowledge, and to be able to sit with a lot of youth and in our traditional homelands, and just to be able to take the time and decompress in these spaces is just always an honor for us in today's ever rat race in which society has deemed us to be in. So just happy to be here today.
Yeah, definitely happy to be here. Yeah, it's nice to be able to work with you. I know you're one of the other people who I always see really doing a lot of work to help hold on to our culture and make it available to people in community. Those things are really important, for us to hold on to in ourselves, but also to share with others. We don't teach those things; the teachings die with us. So, what did it mean to you when you first got contacted and brought in on this project? Like, how'd you respond?
Oh, it was layered, meaning-wise, because it goes back. So my Mishoon teacher is Darius Coombs, Mashpee Wampanoag.
He's my teacher as well.
Right.
So we taught both of us.
And so it's always important to acknowledge who taught us, and the teachings and where they come from. So, in today's day and age, you got a lot of people who watch a thing and then do it, and then, they don't really give proper credit or acknowledgement when it comes to those who have guided you along the way. So I wanted to speak on that first. But yeah, so it was layered to me because, a couple years ago or so, we had come down and we were teaching a brain tanning workshop with some of the Mashpee youth. And because of that, Darius was like, well, why don't you keep your youth our way too, and we'll burn out this Mishoon. And I was like, wow, that's really awesome. So right from there, we burnt our Mishoon out that November after the summer, and then the next Mishoon was this one. So, and it's cool. Once again, it's in collaboration with Wampanoag again, and so it's just doing what we've done for thousands of years. Sister tribes, brushing shoulders, keeping things alive, and helping each other out.
Yeah, it reaffirms those connections between us and the traditional diplomacy between peoples. And I'm really excited about the ways that we as a people collectively, as northeastern New England Dawnland people, can connect with each other through those traditional means of diplomacy that the waterways have always connected us. The rivers are our highways. We also see the old footpaths, like the Boston Post Road over here. It's no wonder that we end up on a village site where the artifacts are coming out of the ground here and across the street, because we're on these old footpaths and on these old riverways. And it's so important to engage with the land and our surroundings and each other in these ways, and to have that be a part of the whole canoe process is really important to me as well. So from the start of acknowledging our teachers as those who've come before us, but also acknowledging each other and that affirmation of the respect that we have to show to each other's communities and territories.
Absolutely.
I think these projects can help us to engage with each other in the world in that way. So
yeah, especially because society, planned obsolescence, planned assimilation, forceful removals, divide and conquer. All these things came when it came to colonization and assimilation, and they found ways in which to divide us, because by dividing us meant to conquer us, and to take our ceremonies away, take our traditional practices away, and make things illegal for us was a way to force us into a particular lifestyle, the lifestyle that they live.
Yeah, it's when everybody has to have their own, and you have a lifestyle of competition instead of collaboration.
Right.
And that just breeds certain types of thinking. When you aren't able to share, you have to worry about scarcity rather than the fact that there's actually enough for everybody.
Right.
and that, of course, then you have worries of inadequacy if you're not able to do the things you need to for yourself. And yet, if you know that you have the ability in yourself to provide your own house, to provide your own clothing, to provide your own food and your own transportation, then really, you're truly a free person.
Right.
That's how you really have freedom, is by knowing that you can look to yourself and depend on yourself for answers. And that's also a part of the culture of colonization, is this idea that there's an authority outside of yourself that has the answers, and you need to go and seek them.
Right.
But we're all imbued with those gifts of our answers, our consciousness, our understanding of the world, and that's a really powerful thing as well. To not be in the mindset of scarcity and I can't or somebody else can.
Right.
We have to turn to somebody else to provide some of the basic things that we all need as human beings.
Right. I think what's also important too is, we come from two different tribes that have different statuses within the state and federal bureau anyways, so as a federally recognized tribe to a state recognized tribe, that is another way to try to create division within us as well, so there's funding this way, there's not funding that way, you can be looked this way, not looked that way, and so it's even more, this is much layered than us just burning out a canoe, a Mishoon. This is us coming back together, solidifying our relationships, and really, when you look at, like we were speaking about earlier, as a Nipmuc, we also have Narragansett lines, and when we go back and we think about why we were tied in so much, it's because there was different types of marriages and different types of things that binded us together, and that was the reason why we survived here for 10, 12,000 years, right? It's like we wouldn't have survived without each other. We know that I wouldn't have been just wearing wampum if we didn't have this relationship with you guys down on the coast, and so.
And even the fact of the matter is, if you look at the old times, not only was there, marriages and such, but a person in their lifetime even might relocate to another part of the region. They look at, the people that move further north, or the fact that you've got the Pocknet family that we have here. Their name means the Pokanoket because they were the people who moved to Mashpee from Pokanoket. And it's a marker of the fact that people didn't just geographically stay in one place. They might relocate as people do today. That movement is a natural part of human history. We weren't monolithic, we weren't sedentary, we weren't just a snapshot of picture of history. Right. And relating back to this idea of the monolith, the idea of this one kind of Indian that's shared everywhere, we all have the same opinion about sports teams and hunting and gun ownership and political party and all that, and these things just fundamentally are not true again and again.
Right.
But as a federally recognized tribe, I understand that we have jurisdictional authority within the state all the way up here into Nipmuc territory, because we have that standing with government-to-government relations with the United States. And yet, as an affirmation of the true government-to-government relation or respect that we're supposed to give to our tribal nations, our sister nations, our neighboring nations, it was one of the first things I was insisting on, is that we had to include Nipmuc people because we are in Nipmuc territory. Whether or not we look at the federal law or the colonial lines, we have to remember that we have a pre-existing jurisdiction, a pre-existing title that holds true when we interrelate with each other in that way. I remember before the Mashpee tribe was federally recognized, and I didn't feel any more Indian, any more Native American the day that we got that decision than the day before. It's not like I suddenly sprouted feathers out of the back of my head. I was born Wampanoag. I've been Wampanoag since the day I was born. I'm going to be Wampanoag until the day I die. And that's not something that anybody can take from me. And so I'm sure you feel about your identity as a Nipmuc. And I think the more we do those things to affirm each other as Native people, as Native communities, especially those ones that have always held strong in spite of the times when people were turning their back on their identity to get ahead in the rest of the world. As we've seen that's happened with so many of us. But there are those communities, Nipmuc, Narragansett, Aquinnah, Shinnecock, that have always held on to that tradition and affirmed each other. And to continue to affirm each other in the face of all the things that we're dealing with today is, I think, also a really important way to function.
Right. Yeah. No, I also just wanted to speak on, a thing too. It's important that this came up into conversation that you're like, oh, we're Nipmuc, and you reached out to me. It's important that we have continuity within each other's communities and that we're supporting each other, because if we weren't doing that in general, how would you know who to call? Or how would you know, hey, this person's doing cultural things, let me reach out to that person? So a lot of times, over time now, depending on what the tribes are doing, it's really important to be able to be doing these things in general, just because who is it that we're going to reach out to when it comes to cultural preservation work or revitalization? Who can burn out a Mishoon? Who can build a traditional home? And then when it comes to forceful relocations, we talk about the Wabanaki people, and we talk about those who had to move out to Vermont, move from Vermont out to Canada. You got the Odahnaks that are still out there, and they're still wanting to come back this way and be acknowledged in the places that they've always been. And so that's something that needs to be acknowledged as well. Just like we're doing right now. Coming together as sister tribes. We need to also be welcoming tribes that aren't back in their traditional homelands, back where they need to be, and welcome them in a good way, and acknowledge them, So that's something that I stand for too. Whenever I step into a territory, I reach out to whatever cultural keepers or bearers or whoever it is within that community that at least I know, or if I don't, then I'll reach out to somebody who might, so that I can talk to them, And so it's a really important thing to move in a good way. Like you spoke about the laws that were created, for the federal laws and jurisdiction and stuff, but we had an old way of doing things, and it's an important way and gesture when we step into each other's territory to acknowledge each other in a good way. And so still definitely thinking about those Odahnaks and the Wabanaki people to come back home to the Vermont area and where they should be, and to conduct ourselves in that way, it reaffirms the strength of our traditional jurisdiction and traditional governance in the face of this this system that seeks to dispossess us of our rightful inheritance, of our territories, of our language, of our lineage, of our natural resources, of our rights to fish, to hunt, to gather. That when we hold each other, in that high regard, it reaffirms those things. You talked about folks who've been dispossessed. I know we have the Dylan here working with us from the Chappaquiddick, and there are no more Chappaquiddick left on Chappaquiddick Island simply because of economics. They've been forced out, yet they've continued to come together as community, pushed out of their land, and that's something that's been seen and people understand. Because we've seen that continuity of coming together, in spite of having the land taken from under their feet. But we also have to reaffirm, like say, further north, you got the Odanak, the Passamaquoddy, who are being told that they have nothing to do with the Passamaquoddy River, or is it Penobscot? They have nothing. Penobscot River.
All right, or you have the Penobscot, who are being told that they have nothing to do with the Penobscot River. It's just absolutely outrageous.
Ludicrous,
the very notion is so absurd. But we have these old, long-standing agreements with the Micmac folks, the Mi'kmaq folks. We've got Otan and Sequan here who are part of, even going back into the 1600s, the English started trading corn with the Wampanoag people, and the Micmac were upset because we had a long-standing trade agreement to trade our surplus corn to the territories further north where they had shorter growing seasons. It affected their way of life up there. So these bonds between us, thousands of years old.
Right.
And to reaffirm those things, they go back older than America, older than colonization.
I mean, we can go all the way back to the Ojibwe and to those folks who were once out this way.
Yep.
And so there's old teachings about that, but we acknowledge, especially from language and Lenape and where all these things come from. It's important to acknowledge each other and each other's spaces. And so it's work like this, it's the work that really supersedes all the things that try to divide. It really allows us to be able to get into spaces and come whole in all the ways. Like we were talking earlier, somebody had said it feels like a family gathering here, and it's like, I know, because when we create spaces like this, right, it just feels like home to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
It feels more unorthodox and feels unnatural to walk through the supermarket than it does to sit by a Mishoon and cook some burgers or deer meat or fiddleheads or anything like that on there. So
yeah, absolutely. And and it's important to come and ask and to seek those permissions. And it's also as our Nipmuc host here on your territory, thank you for allowing us to be here. And that's an important thing too, is not only to ask but to receive well, and to be able to be a host and be generous. And when people come and ask the right way, to not try to put a stop to those good things that could happen.
That's true.
Because they're good for all of us, and those coming together is how we mend fences.
Absolutely.
It's how we heal wounds between our people, is by doing things such as creating a canoe where we have something good to work on together.
Yeah.
If we can put these into the water, I'd love to see fleets of the Mishoons out in Narragansett Bay or Long Island Sound, where we get to go community to community and ask permission to come into the community and share our gifts, share our stories, share our entertainment, and to be received by hosts in a good way as well.
Back up to Connecticut.
Yeah, because to be able to have that back and forth is part of it as well, and to show generations of people how to do that in a respectful way, both as the guest and as the host. It's really important. It's how we know how to function. And one of the things that really was lacking in our encounters with the colonists, they came and they asked for a space to be here, and we, as good hosts, said that they were allowed a seat in the Plymouth area, but they were never satisfied with just that one seat. They always wanted to have the next and the next and the next and more. And when we said that one seat should be enough, that one village site, that one jurisdictional community should be their community where they have authority, they always sought to extend it more and more. If you go to any country in the world, the idea that some foreign government or power just gets to decide to extend its jurisdiction over the land is absurd.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of the people alive today that would follow through of that tradition of the colonial experience might have even preferred, and might even still prefer, living a life under a structure that the tribal governments would have had to offer. Unfortunately, at this point, we're even set aside from being able to function in a way where we're able to welcome, citizenry from who we want to abide by our laws and our rules. Which is really how things are done. The law of the land, any place else, is how things function, and people adapt to it, rather than to assert the law and the ways of someplace else on top of it. And I think that our concepts of freedom, our concepts of democracy, our concepts of egalitarianism really had a huge impact on the colonists who came here. And a big part of what they sought to gain as far as their independence and freedom from monarchy and the English crown. Sadly, a lot of those same freedoms that they sought for themselves, they didn't want to extend over to us. And yet, once you've had a taste of real freedom, once you've had experience with real freedom, I think, I've had a few times, including out in North Dakota, out in Oseti-Sakowing, to have a glimpse and a taste of actual being free. It's hard to go back and do anything different. It's hard to go back to the idea of control and conformity. Because freedom is so delicious.
Sure,
it tastes so good.
If you don't mind, I'll speak a little bit on that. At one time, I'd been a carpenter for 17 years. And you go from regular residentials, building 5+ years in Chatham and building all these custom homes on the beach, and you're creating all this gentrification, and then advancing into the union and becoming a union carpenter, a journeyman, and the society makes you comfortable with the dollars, but what you're doing is you're creating this gentrification everywhere, and as an indigenous person, you're like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? They have a way of creating classes of people, what deems you to be the good class, the higher class of people, and where people should live is, and who's deeming these things, and so it's really crazy. It got to a point, at least for me in my life, where just like you're talking about, when you taste that freedom, I know for some years, as indigenous folks, we always know who we are and how things were, but there comes a point in all of our individual lives that either something will spark or we'll set up a camp like this, and some of these young are like, oh, maybe I can live like this, and they can kind of see that, hey, those two guys are living like that, maybe I can too, and to be able to find that balance here without having to be a slave to society, in which the ways that they have created for us to be, and so, yeah, it's been a few years for me, leaving the union and just doing all cultural work, starting being the creative director of No Loose Braids. All that was piggybacked off of spending some time with the Okateu Cultural Center in Western Mass and rebuilding that. The carpentry work that I do, that if I do now, it's going to be for our people. Our people should be able to walk through the places that we build. Mm-hmm. Why are we creating high rises in places we can never afford to live?
Absolutely.
And in fact, creating less space for whoever's in that particular tribe to not be there. And so that tastes of freedom, but it takes a particular type of setting, a place like this, with these spaces that we're creating right now, for these young ones to spark that flame in them, or even adults, to spark that flame in them. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Why am I living like this?
Yeah, I remember being in Christiantown in Martha's Vineyard, and being on my hands and knees, putting in tile floors, at this house, and just, reflecting and reminiscing on the fact that I know when my great-great-grandfather was illegally dispossessed of the very land I was working on, where I was putting up this huge private mansion, and, with this, $80,000 tile job, if I wasn't there to work, I would have been stopped 2 miles out at the gate that started at the dirt road.
Right.
I know the names of the people who should have been able to hold on to that land and why they were dispossessed of it and when.
Right.
And yet, this is the reality we live in. And it is important, and it's great to have these young folks see a sight of freedom, or see that they can live in a different way. And it's part of what having this, we call it an apprenticeship program, and I think it's really, a lot of it's about validating the fact that these young people who are working with have a lot of knowledge and experience in what they're doing. I mean, we're sitting here as the leads or the more knowledgeable people, and we haven't had to look at the canoe for, I don't know, however long, and we can trust that they have it all right. And it's great as well with these intergenerational things. We have Uktan and Sequan back there, and their father Anawan was also one of the people who I learned a whole lot about.
Same with me.
Culturally, as far as making canoes and many other things. So, these things come back around and round from uncles and fathers and aunts and grandmothers and cousins, and
now my nephew's working with them, and you see how it keeps
and,
tying together, you know.
And to not only give them a glimpse, but to affirm that these things have value.
Yeah.
And these skills, these traditions are something that are worth holding on to and worth the effort of gaining and learning. You know, so to have something like this where people can not only take part but can be recognized in an official way of having those skills is also, you know, I think important, because society lots of times doesn't place value on the things that they don't contribute to the consumerism, to the throwaway plastic wrap culture. You know?
Yeah. And what good is it for us to know this stuff if these young ones aren't here, you know?
Yeah.
What good is it for the light, the spark to wake up in us, and, you know, us not to share that with somebody else, you know? And so, you know, these are the things that I never understood when I'd get into particular dog-eat-dog types of job sites and things like that, those who didn't want to share knowledge, because our people aren't like that, you know? If you got the knowledge, you share it with the next person so that it can continue. But, you know, society in today's day and age, you know, no, knowledge is kept in like a secret because that will advance them in a particular area. But it's like, that's not how we move. That's not how we get ahead, you know?
Yeah, well, this is when you're taught greed and selfishness and competition as fundamental values.
Right.
As values, which is what the educational model that we are working in the whole of the United States right now teaches, is greed, selfishness, and competition. You compete with your classmates. You try to get the most of, you know, your ambition is to make a lot of money, more than your neighbor, and have a bigger house or a bigger car. If this is how we judge what success looks like, you know, rather than the happiness and well-being of the entirety of us, the ease in which somebody born into the world can meet the needs of their own life, then there is incentive to hold on to those things for yourself, because the idea is if somebody else gets it, that you don't.
Right.
And when you start to teach collaboration and cooperation and enoughness, then there's only benefit in sharing.
Right.
Because the better off you are, the better off we all are.
Yeah.
Because the more that you can do to take care of yourself, the less I need to do to take care of you.
Right.
You know, it's
like common sense, you know,
but
it's not taught, you know, it's taught the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we work together, you know, maybe we can achieve a lot more than either one of us on our own. So,
Right.
You know, and that's you know, and that's really truth that, you know, nobody can deny the fact of coming together to work on things. You know, that's why, you know, that's why there aren't so many, you know, self-made, as much as people might call themselves that, you know, people out there. People come together, they get involved with the team, and the team does good work, and they make things happen.
Yeah.
It's